everyone, it's Ileana and I have quite a few cards to share with you today. I'm going to be experimenting with some color burst. I did play with the color burst while I was in Houston over the spring, and I wanted to use the same colors, but unfortunately I left those behind there. So I'm just going to be using 3 colors here. I did use some of the liquid platinum stuff, and it just added a little bit of shimmer, but you don't really need it for this. So I'm just dipping some Canson watercolor paper into the droplets, and I really should have put more water down because it's just not spreading onto the watercolor paper. So I just added the water to the paper. And I just set these aside to dry, and I made these ahead of time so that they could dry overnight, just because I didn't want to have to sit and wait for them. So once I get them all dipped into the color, I just keep going until all of the colors turn to purple. So for my background, I'm going to be using these Pinkfresh layering background dies. It is the Fancy Floral 1 and 2 die. And I'll talk about this iCrafter cutting mat later on in the video. But for now, I'm just going to use the backgrounds I made and cut out the bigger panel just so that you see more of the watercolor paper. I did use this metallic silver paper. I believe I got it from Anchor Crafts, but you can use any kind of color you want. And I want to elevate my front panel so that you're able to see the pretty watercolor from behind. So what I'm doing is I'm cutting these little strips with my cut-a-line, and I'm going to stack them up so that it will raise the cardstock up. I don't want to layer or cut more panels, because then you won't see that underneath. So when you tilt the card, you're able to see more of the watercolor underneath. You'll see what I'm talking about later on. So I'm just going to stack these up. I'm just using some liquid adhesive just because it's pretty fast and it will dry pretty quickly. I'm using this one from Tonic. So once I get those done, I'm going to go ahead and add those to the sides, the long sides. I didn't cut any of the smaller ones because I didn't know how much I would need. So I'm just adding that to the sides. And then what I'll do is I'll take the leftover pieces that I have, and I'm just going to trim them down to add them to the short sides. You could use foam, but I didn't want the foam to be white from the side, and that's why I'm kind of using the same gray. You could use foam, but like I said, I didn't want the foam to show underneath the card, and by using the same cardstock as the top panel, you're not able to see it as much. So I'm just adding some adhesive to the watercolor panel, and I'm going to put it onto this it's like a light metallic white, silver, pearly kind of color. Once again, that's from Anchor paper. I'll try to see if I could link it in the description, but you can use any kind of paper you want. Now for the sentiments, I'm going to use some sentiments from Pinkfresh, and this is the Simply Sentiments You and Hello stamp sets. So I really like the size of the font, so you're able to get some really great sentiments there. This one is the Modern Layering Florals, and then this one is called Take Pride. So they all have really good sentiments. And I am using the new MISTI. I'm so sorry that it's not quite available yet, but it is so freaking awesome. Anyways, I'm just going to put my sentiments. I'm not really too worried about lining things up and making sure that they're straight, because I'm going to use my cut-a-line later. Now this paper is a little bit slick because it's a little shiny. It's got a sheen to it. It's metallic. So I am using STAX, and I did use my anti-static tool, and that's because I'm going to still emboss with it. Now I can't get my magnet out, so I had to take everything out and then just slide it out. And I'm stamping it with the STAX a couple of times. I kind of have this weird thing with STAX. I really like the way it smells. I'm not sure why, but I do kind of like the way it smells. but it's not dark enough. So I'm going to go ahead and go back and add the VersaFine Clair because it is super dark. And I'm going to go ahead and use some clear embossing powder on top just because it adds that little bit of sheen to it. I am using the Brutus Monroe Icicle. I'm going to go ahead and heat set that with my heat tool, and then I'm going to trim everything out using my cut-a-line. I do like using my cut-a-line instead of a paper trimmer to cut out my sentiments, just because I feel like I'm able to get things a little bit straighter, and I don't need to spend the time making sure that my sentiments are straight in the MISTI. This way I could just line things up. I am using the grid side because of the descenders in the sentiments. That way I'm lining up the squares with the top of the word and not the ascenders or the descenders. I hope that makes sense. But anyways, this way that they're all perfectly lined up. And like I said in the past, you don't want to press hard with your craft knife. You just want to run your blade down, and then you can kind of feel when the paper goes through. You kind of hear this scratching noise when you cut, and once you're through the paper, that scratching noise goes away. And for the edges, I just use the edges of the paper and one of the grid lines to make sure everything's lined up, and then that way the edges are the exact same grid square across. So once those are cut down, I really didn't know which sentiment I wanted to use, and I did have multiples of this card done, so I figured I could use them all instead of having to decide one for the same look. So now that that's all done, I'm going to go ahead and place these on my card. It's the same color, kind of the shiny cardstock that I used for the background, and I want it to have a little bit more of I don't know, it just needed a little bit more. So I'm going to use some silver thread, and I'm just going to wind it behind and add that with some foam squares. Now this card here, I did use one of the backgrounds that just kind of turned out purple. And I used that one just to see if I would like it. And I kind of like the gray one better. So for this next card, I am using the inspiration from a previous card I made. And these colors are from a My Favorite Things release. And I'll be sure to include that in the description. But I'm just going to take that watercolor panel, and I'm going to use the My Favorite Things wonky rectangles. And I will be using my iCrafter self-healing mat. So these mats are self-healing, they're a little rubbery, and to use it in a Gemini, you need one plate and then the two self-healing ones, and it'll cut beautifully through the Gemini die cutter. And for the flowers, I am using the Pinkfresh Dainty Blossoms, and these are super dainty, beautiful little flowers. I'm just going to arrange them in a way that I like, and I'm just trimming some of these so that I could kind of make a little bouquet with it. I did die cut several of these. I want to say I did 3, maybe 4 of each. I don't recall. But as I've told you before, I do have a metal shim underneath my cutting mat. And what I like to do is use my circle magnets or my bar magnets on top of that, and it kind of holds things in place for me. You want to be careful when you're doing the little disc magnets like this, because if you get them too close, they will jump together and they could possibly break. The super magnets are very fragile, and just the force alone will get them to could shatter them. I did take my flower off to the side, and I did spray it with some spray adhesive, and I'm just placing it down. I didn't layer these yet. I found that because they're so dainty, it is so much easier to layer them once you get them on the card. So once I get my first layer down and dried, I will take another one, and I'm just going to stack it right on top. And I should have cut all of these together at the same time so that I would know exactly where to trim that bottom one. But anyways, I'm just going to go ahead and spray this one again. And then you can see it's so much easier to line this up, and it will stay flat this way. And then you don't have to worry about your pieces moving, and you can use your pick, and you have a little bit of time to get that right in place. So with little dainty ones, I found that it's much easier to stack them on my project than to stack them before. Trust me, because I did it the other way before and it was just a big mess. I had glue all over my fingers. So once this is all done, I just mounted this on a piece of white cardstock. The original one I had done on craft, but for this one I did on white. Now for my final card, I went back and I thought, well, what if I used the light pearl color with some doodlebug glitter paper, or you can use any kind of white glitter paper. And I layered these on top of each other. And I wanted to add something simple like for a wedding card or something like that, but by itself, the sentiment just got lost. So I wanted to do something to try to kind of make it pop a little bit more. And I layered them together, but it still wasn't enough. So then I cut a little piece of vellum, and I will show you how I made that shadow for the shadow. So this is assignment says stamp love die, and I've cut the shadow and I've layered it. I've got maybe 3 layers behind the word love. No, it's 4, because here's 2 more and I already had one on there. So I'm just layering 2 and I'm letting them dry, and then I'm gonna show you how I did the shadow. So I glued the shadow onto a piece of vellum, and then I put the die on top of the white, and because it sits in there, you're able to trace the die. And now I'm able to go around and fussy cut around that, and now my vellum piece is even all the way around. And I'm just going to go back and I'm going to erase the pencil that I didn't cut. So that way I have the perfect shadow for the shadow. So now I can stack everything all together. Because I tried to freehand it and I was just crooked all over the place. And I tried to draw it and I was still crooked. And so this was the easiest way, just to trace the die. And so now I have this pretty dimensional word love to add to my card. And I have one where the shadow is the glitter paper and one where the word is the glitter paper. And I don't know which one I want to do, so I'm going to play around to see which one I like best on which one. Okay, so here is the final outcome. I think that turned out pretty awesome. I think it'd be an awesome wedding card, or just a kind of like a just because card to someone special. Now here's one that I turned into a thanks, and I did add some glossy accents to the inside of the flowers. I used the thanks script sentiment from Tailored Expression, and then the love came from Simon Says Stamp. Now for the other cards, I ended up doing, this is how they turned out. So I did just change out the sentiments and I added the glossy accents. This black glossy paper is from Alan Hudson, and this one too, I went ahead and added some glossy accents or some Nouveau drops to the center of each of the flowers. I think I went back and forth and did both, and you can see how each of those turned out differently. And here is the one with the purple foreground. And these, I love these. I didn't add a sentiment just because I just didn't want to add it. I mean, it just turned out pretty on its own. Let me know which one is your favorite in the comments below. And if you enjoyed these videos, be sure to give it a thumbs up and don't forget to hit that subscribe button. And I hope you have a great day. Bye.